We're recording, so 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everyone. I just want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from Canada's house in Los Angeles, and we are on the traditional grounds of the Tongva people. And we thank the Tongva people for being caretakers of this land, and we are the latest guests. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. My name is Zaib Shaikh. I'm Canada's Consul General to Los Angeles, serving Southern California, Nevada, and Arizona. And this is the BRIC conference. And we're excited that Canada is able to attend this year virtually. And we're really looking forward to being part of things next year in person and being part of these kinds of great conversations more in person in a post-pandemic world. Today, I'm joined with Shabnam, Rezaei, and Sami Tesfazghi, great Canadian creators who are part of our Canadian producers and creators of the Canadian Creative Accelerator, or CCA for short. The CCA takes place over 2 to 3 months and provides participants with a better understanding of how the entertainment industry functions in Los Angeles, as well as giving some guidance and introductions to executives and potential partners and creative collaborators. As I said, with me today are Shabnam and Sami. Thanks for joining me. Our conversation today is, what is diversity in Canadian entertainment? And that's a rather broad conversation, I know, and a big topic, but perhaps we can dive into it a little bit and get your thoughts and perspectives on that. Obviously, there's many barriers for creators of color, creators from different communities, creators with different genders. But when you think of your experiences, Shabnam and Sami, it'd be great to get a sense of what your experiences, personal experiences, have been like, whether on set, in the development process, or as you move to share your productions beyond the set experience. So a quick little overview would be great, not only of who you are, but also what your experiences have been. Pass it over to Shabnam first.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And it is a really broad topic to talk about diversity, especially in production as a Canadian company. My company is called Big Bad Boo Studios in Vancouver, and we do animated television series for children. We have shows like 1001 Nights, 16 Hudson, and The Bravest Night, that's on Hulu in the US. When it comes to sort of, what diversity means in Canadian entertainment, for me personally, it's sort of been the mission of our company, which is we want to tell stories that reflect reality. And in Canada, we have such a diverse and colorful fabric. And if you take a cross section of my kids' everyday life, that's sort of what I want reflected back on the screen so that they can see themselves on television and so that they can have role models and not feel like they are an other. So for example, in our series 16 Hudson, we have a multitude of families that show different family makeup. As an example, we have an adopted child named Luke, who's adopted from Haiti, and one of his dads is from the Philippines. He is a baker. He's an executive pastry chef in the cafe in the building. And his father, his other father, Paul, is a he's a pharmaceutical sales agent. So, this is a family makeup that we see in our lives, and we had previously never seen on television in Canada. If you believe it, it's the first time that an LGBTQ family was presented as a main character, main family, main role. And this is something that we experience in our lives. And my nephew, for example, has 2 dads. And I wanted, his name is Keon, he's 4 now. I wanted Keon to be able to turn on the TV and see himself in television. So to me, it's very personal. It's what it means, and it means sort of reflecting reality.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Shabnam. That's a great overview. And of course, as you said, you're co-founder of Big Bad Boo Studios out of Vancouver in Canada. And now Sami Tesfazghi, you're a producer and partner at Inferno Pictures from Winnipeg, Canada. Why don't you give us an overview as well of the work, but also, as Shabnam did, a bit of why you're a big promoter of diversity in Canadian entertainment, but also some of your experiences that led you to be that kind of person.
Yeah, no, thanks again for having me as well. I think it's a great opportunity to kind of talk about what the word diversity, which Shabnam kind of talked about, saying it's a broad word, but I think there's a lot of that happening now, everywhere. And I think Canada is a very interesting place to kind of have these discussions about because of how multicultural we are. I am, like you said, a partner and a producer at Inferno Pictures. It's a live action sort of feature film and now TV company that was founded by two guys. Now it's owned by Ian Dimmerman. I'm a partner there with him. And one of the reasons I kind of got into producing was that I've always been a fan of movies, and I've always been a fan of seeing people that look like me on movies as well. So one of the reasons I kind of want to get into film production or film producing was to sort of kind of tell, stories and experiences of people that look like me. And when I started, I was 21, 22, a little naive, kind of picked up the phone and called, just thought, yeah, I'd call a production company and they'll hear me out and we'll make a movie and the rest will be history, which obviously was not the case. But what was great about working or being a part with Inferno is that when I started, I called, like I said, literally 50 companies, and I only got one call back by one producer who's at Inferno Pictures, and he kind of sat down with me for coffee to kind of tell me a little bit about, what film production is all about, how to kind of get into producing, and sort of kind of the different ropes. And they gave me the opportunity to intern with them, and then I've been with them ever since with the company. So for me, even today, like when people call me up, I always pick up the phone and try to guide people and talk to them. What was interesting was that there wasn't, and there isn't, a lot of people that look like me that are producers or work, with different writers. So at first I thought, no, this is maybe just how people don't want to get into producing, or it's not something that they know how to get into. So it was very important for me as I kind of grew as a producer to sort of really help people out. And I find, a lot of joy in answering calls from people that are trying to get into the industry, whether it's coming to set, whether it's sort of kind of asking how to get into it. And this past year, one of the projects that we're involved in is sort of a dream project that I've always thought, I wanted to get into. It's called The Porter, which is sort of the first all BPOC writers' room directors project in Canadian television film history, which I think is a very important project. And when we had the opportunity to be part of it, I said to Ian that this is something that 100% we should be part of, because it was the first time that I've been part of a meeting, a production meeting, a writers meeting, a producers meeting, where in the Zoom, the majority of the people look like me, which is very rare. And I always kind of struggled with understanding how multicultural Canada is, how many diverse people live in Canada. It's a melting pot. My parents came here as immigrants, and there wasn't a lot of stories, or there wasn't a lot of stuff that was coming out of Canada that was telling the stories, which I think is great that we're kind of changing that narrative. So with that opportunity, with being involved in The Porter, I said to the other producers that I really want to take this opportunity to bring out the multicultural people that are in Winnipeg that want to be part of this. And I think it'll be a great opportunity. I'm really, really excited to be part of this production and get going on it this spring as well. So that's sort of my way into film producing. Yeah.
That's great. What great stories you both have in terms of why you're in the business and what you're doing in the business representing and how you're representing. Let's talk a little bit about that, Shabnam. Your experiences getting here to this moment, this movement, what's that been like, and where do you think the possibilities are going next from this moment?
Yeah, my experiences overall, I think growing up in an environment where, like Sami said, you're always the minority sort of in the room, you get used to it. You get used to being, in my case, the only girl in engineering school. You get used to being the only girl who's good at math in math class, and the rest of the class are immigrants from China or Jamaica. This was the makeup of my college at the time. But then, you know, I feel like over the last 5 or 8 years, people have started to pay attention to bringing more color, trying to achieve gender balance in rooms. When Prime Minister Trudeau balanced his cabinet, that was a big moment for me because he said, you know, we're doing this because we can. And, you know, that was one of the first moments when I woke up and said, I should be doing the same thing for my production team. I should look at every department and make sure we're gender balanced, especially as a female leading the studio. So it's an awareness, not just for people who aren't from, you know, quote unquote minority backgrounds. It's an awareness for all of us to embrace it and to pay attention to it, and not to be used to the old way, because the old way, we were all used to it and we never questioned it. And now when things are getting questioned, we're saying, oh yeah, that's right. There aren't enough women in this room, or there aren't people of different backgrounds in the room. So I think we're on the right track in terms of trying to ensure that not just behind the scenes, but also on camera, in my case for voice acting, when we match voice acting to the characters we've designed, that they match up. There's real intent behind not just, you know, the makeup of the teams, but also the content that's being created. So I'm really, really hopeful that this is just the beginning of it. We've just barely scratched the surface of trying to create a more diverse production environment for behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. But I also think that it will result in better content when you have different perspectives in the room. In our case, for example, with 16 Hudson, it's one of our shows that I mentioned earlier. We have characters from different places. So we have one character, Lily's best friend, Sam, is of Chinese descent. And I wanted a writer of Chinese heritage in the room when we started our writing rooms for the first season. And we couldn't find any children's writers who were of Chinese heritage. This was about 3 years ago. So what we ended up doing was we went to the grown-up world and we stole a writer from the grown-up world and essentially trained her on how we write for children's, and let her into the writer's room, and they gave her a script. And by now she's a pro, and she's now brought on other people. So sort of, if you continue to reach back, then that person reaches to former other people, and it can be this beautiful pyramid, rainbow of explosion, where you have so many people now multiplying and enabling other creators to come in, other talent to come in and get trained, so that we can have better stories ultimately.
Well, it's a great experience. How fascinating and interesting that you had to find a writer from the adult, a more contemporary, I should say, not adult.
Yeah, I say grown up because adult can be
grown
mistaken
up,
for
good,
other type of content.
Yeah, the grown up is a good way to look at it. But the fact that you had to do that, big congrats out to you for doing that, and obviously to your writer who's taken that leap, that charge, and then move forward with confidence and is bringing other people into the writing room, from the grown-up world into the kids world, which is such a great thing. Sami, what about you? You talked about, you know, your experience wanting to open up the live action spectrum in Winnipeg and beyond, obviously. What have your experiences been like, and what do you make of this particular moment, and how do you think this is going to become a movement, or how do you think you're going to be able to take advantage of from your goals in terms of this moment and movement?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Like, you know, like Shabnam said, I've always, in anything that I've done, I've always sort of been the minority, and I've never looked at it as like, oh, you know, I'm not getting opportunities. I've never looked at it that way. But then as I kind of got older and as I kind of started working, you know, reading scripts and being on set and stuff like that, especially living in Winnipeg, which is sort of like, it's got a lot of like, I don't know, you might be familiar with Volcarama, which is sort of this massive sort of multicultural festival. So I've always kind of been like, I went to those events, my parents were part of those events, but then I would go to a movie set, or I go work on, in the office at a movie, like in an office setting. And I was the only sort of like Black person. So I was like, maybe, maybe these people just don't want to do it. But I never, as I was younger, I never looked at it that way. And then as I started going more and more to the movie sets, one of the funny things that kept happening was a lot of the local people kept asking me if I was from Toronto or if I was from LA, because they've never themselves really seen sort of like, Black people on set, or whether it's from a producing standpoint. So that kind of was comedic, but then also troublesome, because I was like, why is that? You know what I mean? And then, we worked on some movies where we had some big actors that were of color, and they kind of gravitated towards me, and we could, we would kind of talk about the different things that were important to me from producing. And it wasn't until about a year and a half ago that when I went to LA, I met with a manager, and I sort of asked them if they had any sort of clients that they had represented as writers that were of color but Canadian. And then she said to me, as a matter of fact, I have one. He lives in Toronto, and that was Anthony Farrell. So we always joke that I had to go to LA to connect with a writer of color who lived in the same country as me. So, and when I connected with Anthony, I kind of told him why I wanted to connect with him, why I wanted to sort of kind of find different writers. And he basically said, look, I'm doing the same thing. And one of the big things that I'm trying to do is sort of like champion writers and make Black showrunners, because there's a lack of that. So we kind of had like a very similar vision. And that really opened up the door for me in terms of meeting all these different creatives that were in Toronto or in Vancouver. I'm still working on hopefully trying to kind of find that same group of people in Winnipeg, which I know there is a lot, and it started coming out a little bit. And I'm hoping that with the Porter, one of the initiatives that we're doing is sort of applying for some grants that we're going to put towards hiring minority, writers or producers assistants, or people that kind of will get a taste of what it's like to work in a movie industry, or what it's like to work on set and stuff like that. So I've taken everything from my experiences as a positive and sort of try to use it and utilize it to sort of kind of open up. And I recently also got connected with the Black Screen Office, which is a group that opened up last fall, and their initiative is great. And I've been talking to them and kind of collaborating with them on sort of kind of finding, some different writers or people that want to get into the industry. So at first it was a little discouraging, but I honestly think with everything happening, it's a very positive and very encouraging movement. And I think it's here to stay. And with the way, being part of the CCA, where we always talk about these, when we're talking to some of these different buyers and some of these different industry tycoons about how content is being viewed, how content is, becoming more global because of how it's being distributed through the streamers. It's not this idea of, oh, this is too Canadian, or this is too urban, or this is, you know what I mean? Like, I think people are open to watching stories about people that live in Toronto, just the way they watch stories about live in London or in Paris and stuff like that. So I think it's a great movement. And I think we just have to sort of kind of keep pushing it and not sort of like kind of sit back and say, oh, we've done it. There's a couple of things happening. I think it's going to be, it can't grow organically. I think it needs to keep being pushed, just like Shabnam said, in the animation world. It's the same thing. And having a young daughter who's growing up, the work that Shabnam's doing with her animation is really great. And I think it's phenomenal for kids to be able to watch stuff on TV where they can relate to and look at characters that look like them. So I think it's great. And it's sort of this new era that I'm very positive about and hopeful about, for sure.
That's great. Sami, you mentioned, this idea that you had to basically look beyond Canada to get connected back into Canada with a person of color, a person who you could, another Black writer, obviously in the country writing like you, but from a Canadian perspective, not connecting until you connected with a place like LA, obviously, a global media hub and entertainment hub. Now, in terms of that, we at the consulate here in Los Angeles are specifically here to help, of course, all industry, but the entertainment and media industry is a key facet for us. And we're here through our Trade Commissioner service, here on the ground, helping Canadians connect with those American businesses out of LA, those production hubs, those studios, those streamers. And the CCA, as you said, is a place where we give an opportunity, a ramp, some momentum to help, people sell their productions, help grow their production company, help grow their ideas, their partnerships, their collabs. What do you think Canada is doing right now when it relates to that kind of opportunity or platform? Sami, I'll go to you first because you brought up this idea of having to leave Canada, and then of course, Shabnam.
Yeah, I think it's great, and to your point, I'm very grateful for the consulate because I met you guys and Matthew like about 2 or 3 years ago through a program that the CNPA put together, which I thought was phenomenal and a really good way of not only connecting with people and companies in LA, but also connecting with producers like Shabnam. And Shabnam and I have talked offline because I've never really known anything about Shabnam's company, which I think is a phenomenal company and the work that they're doing until I was part of this program. So I think that's really great. I think what the consulate's doing, what I think some of the different things that Telefilm's doing now with sort of these outreach programs, what some of the Black Screen Office is doing and stuff like that. I think those are all really important things. And as you're kind of starting now, I think just maybe finding a way to sort of give more people access to it and try to sort of kind of make them annual, you know what I mean? Where like you kind of bring different people through and kind of asking what the needs are. Because I think it's great. And I think it's a phenomenal way to connect, not only connect Canadians with each other, but also connect Canadians with, the different companies that you guys have put us together in touch with. So I think it's phenomenal. I think, it should continue. Like, I think that it's very, very valuable for a lot of different things. So.
That's great. Well, it's our first year. We just launched the CCA, but we're definitely here to stay with it. So looking forward to that. Shabnam, what about you? What's your sense?
Well, I just want to say, first of all, I agree with Sami. I think you guys are doing such a phenomenal job in having programs like this, which are so beneficial to producers like myself and Sami. And in terms of what Canada is doing right, Canada is doing a lot right, and we need to do more of it, and we need to repeat it. So more of it and repeat it. I'll give you some examples. Recently Canada has opened up a lot of programs for BIPOC talent, BIPOC creatives. In my journey in getting 16 Hudson up and running, which is a show that's now on TVO Kids, sur Radio Canada in French in Canada. It's also on Amazon Prime Video in the US. 16 Hudson is at the moment in season 3. And over the years, from the moment I told you the story about bringing on our first writer, we've brought on multiple other writers from various different backgrounds. And one of the things that it opened my eyes to was that not only do I need to do this in my writer's room, I need to do this in my production offices as well. So I actually approached the Canadian Media Fund about 2 years ago and explained to them that I felt we needed more support for BIPOC talent. And they were able to facilitate a small grant for us about a year ago. And just this last week, we put on our first BIPOC workshops. And we did them in 3 areas that I had identified as being a little bit off kilter when it comes to having BIPOC. So the 3 departments were writing, then animation. So in my animation department in Vancouver, I see more men than I see women. And I see more, we have less people of color in the department. The same is true of our storyboard department. And I don't know the reasons behind it, but I do know that there are a lot of great female artists out there who storyboard and who animate. They're just not coming through to us. So we put on these workshops for people that are in the industry that are either have graduated from college, university, and they're trying to get a leg up, or they're trying to get networking going. And right after we put on the workshops, CBC Kids contacted us and said, we would like to help you with these workshops. How can we help? So we're facilitating one-on-one sessions with our young talent directly with the senior executives at CBC Kids. So that's just one tiny example of what Canada is doing. And the way I've always felt about it is, don't just talk about it, do something about it yourself. So I may be considered a BIPOC, I may be a woman, and I can sit around and complain about it, but I can also do something about it. And I feel like we are in a position, especially if you are a producer, you've done something, you have some level of networking and contacts. It's really time to give back to the young. It's really time to turn around and put your hand down and pull people up with you. So apart from all the formal programs that Canada has in place, I feel like it's a very collaborative environment and everyone gets that. Everyone wants to help. The example being CBC Kids just reaching out to me out of the blue and saying, hey, can we help? So people are nice and I like that. I like that about us in Canada. I wish that in the US there could be more direct BIPOC contribution in the forms of grants, in the form of these supportive groups, for example, like the program you're running right now, to connect, not just within the US, but also up to Canada. And so I think there's room for improvement, if it were. And, you know, discussions like this help us get the word out, help us have an honest conversation about what we're doing and what we need to be doing more of.
Well, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. As you said, Shabnam, thanks so much, Sami. Thanks so much, Shabnam, for joining us. Thanks for being part of our CCA. And thanks to everyone at BRIC for listening to this conversation on what diversity means to the Canadian entertainment industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.